The number one comment I get on my past video about why you shouldn't use GoPros for live streaming is what camera I would recommend instead. Well, the AVKANS Go just made it to the top of that list. It is cheaper than a GoPro and it won't have you bashing your head against a wall trying to set it up. So let's take a closer look. Hi, I'm Aaron Parecki. I make videos on this channel to help you level up your live streams, whether you're just getting started with your first camera or setting up a multi-camera production for your business. I am not going to recap all the problems with GoPros for live streaming in this video. I'll link to that past video down below in case you want the details. But what I will say is that usually if you're thinking about using a GoPro for your streams, it's either because you're looking for something around that price rather than spending $1,000 or more for a larger camera, or you want something that is small and easy to mount without big heavy rigging. So if you don't mind spending $1,000 or more per camera, and you don't mind dealing with large heavy lenses, then you can just skip this video. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the AVKANS Go. First, I want to thank AVKANS for sending this over to share with you on my channel. But this is not a sponsored video and they aren't going to review this video before I post it. This is the AVKANS Go. It has a built-in battery, it has a tripod mount on the bottom, it has a micro HDMI on the back, as well as a USB-C port, has a 1/8 inch jack for a microphone, and a micro SD card slot. On the front is this little lens cap that is attaches magnetically. You can kind of see it pops in there, and it's got a nice little string to hang on there so you don't actually lose it. It is a 4K camera and it has a 3x optical zoom, and you can see the aperture of this is actually pretty good, nice and low range. Getting this connected into a video switcher is just a matter of connecting a micro HDMI cable from here into the video switcher of your choice, like the Rodecaster video that I've got on the table. You might also notice that there is no screen on the camera, so in order to actually do anything with it, we're going to have to pair it with a phone for control. So before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and plug in the micro HDMI and a USB-C cable, and I'm actually going to use a USB-C power over Ethernet dongle. You can get these for around anywhere between $30 to $100, and this actually will give the camera a wired network connection. And if you have a power over Ethernet switch, it will also power the camera. I always recommend hardwiring your camera power when you're doing live streams. That way you don't need to worry about the battery life at all. With that, I will launch the app and get the camera connected. I'm going to use the top option, which will actually get the camera onto my Wi-Fi network. It weirdly does need to do that, even though I've plugged in the Ethernet, just because that's, I guess, how the control works. It's going to search for nearby devices. I'll go ahead and tap it there. And now it's able to go, and there we go. It's connected. And I see a little preview on the phone here. So this is now where we can start fine-tuning the image to make it look a little better. What I'm going to do is actually put this side by side with one of my Lumix BGH1 cameras. This camera, as well as this camera, are the cameras that I usually use around my studio. I've got a bunch of them around here, and I like that they're all consistent and the color looks the same, and they're just really easy to manage. But these cameras are not cheap, so we're going to see how well we can make the little AVKANS Go look as close as we can get to this camera. So here I've got the AVKANS camera on the top, and I've got the Lumix BGH1 down below for reference. I'm going to go ahead and click on the little gear in the app and click on setup. Now we can go and tweak the settings into here until this looks close. It's actually already a pretty good start. I'm going to go down to the bottom here and choose image settings. And you can see we get a lot of control over the image that we have on the camera here. It looks like this is maybe a little bit overexposed. So I'm going to take the brightness down a notch, maybe a little bit more. I can adjust the contrast. Action cameras usually look pretty contrasty, so I'm going to go down a bit because I don't like the contrasty look that you would get from a GoPro. There's also sharpness, which is a classic sign of an action camera. You can see if I go all the way to the right with the sharpness here, it just doesn't look great, especially on that wall calendar back there. If I go too far, it's going to look just a little too smooth. So somewhere in the middle is a good range for the sharpness. This WDR, this is wide dynamic range. If I go all the way over there, you'll see this is maybe a little bit. Again, it just looks a little bit action camera-y. So let's take that down to the bottom. And this is actually looking reasonably close to the BGH1 picture. There's also white balance, so I can adjust the white balance here. Let's say maybe if it's too far over to the right, it's going to look too orange. And I really want that pink wall to come out. So I'm going to go, that might be a little bit too far to the left. So it looks like somewhere around 46, maybe 40, no, maybe 46, 47. This is one of my complaints about the app is that it's a little bit hard to do these kind of fine adjustments with the sliders here. We've also got the chroma slider, which is going to make adjustments way too far in one direction or the other, but maybe a small adjustment could look good. Let's try a chroma 8, and that's actually looking okay. Let's take the saturation down a couple notches and see if that helps. I think maybe this is actually pretty good. This is looking pretty good. So this is the AVKANS and the BGH1 side by side so you can compare. Now I also want to show you what this looks like next to a GoPro. I've actually already gone into the GoPro and tweaked the settings as much as I can to make it look about as good as I can get out of the GoPro. I've adjusted the field of view to narrow so that we don't have that super wide bulgy look. I've turned on Pro Tune for manual control over the colors and exposure, and I even installed the GoPro Labs firmware, which means that the camera will actually boot up with a HDMI output as the video instead of going into the photo album. I'll link to a video down below where I actually explain all of these settings in greater detail if you do find that you have to use a GoPro for some reason. So this is about as good as you can get with the GoPro, and personally, I think that the AVKANS already looks a lot better. But one other huge difference between the GoPro and the AVKANS is that this actually has an optical zoom. So I can go into the app here and I can zoom in. And this is going to give me a much better picture than zooming in on the GoPro, which will just look super grainy. Optical zoom is also not something you usually find on cameras of this size, so that's really nice to see. It can also focus extremely close to the lens. This is like a couple inches away, and it's able to grab focus on that and give me a nice depth of field. Versus the GoPro, which everything is just in focus and kind of just a little blurry. So now we've got the picture from the AVKANS looking pretty good, but this is just the beginning because once you have this set up, there's actually a lot more you can do with the camera too. So far, we've been looking at the picture from the camera going into the HDMI port running into my video recording setup here. But HDMI out is just one of the ways you can get a picture from this camera. There's also a USB port, and the USB port has two functions. You can either use it for power over Ethernet, like I'm doing here with this dongle, where I've got a Ethernet wire connected to my network switch, giving it power, and then this feeds power to the camera and network. Or you can use the USB as a webcam. So I can take this USB cable, plug it into the back, run it over to the Rodecaster video on the desk, and then I'm going to scroll down here to the USB output settings, and I'll change that to UVC. That's going to make the camera do a little reset here, and it'll take a second, reconnect, and that will enable the UVC output on the USB port. So once the camera has reconnected, then I'm able to connect it back to the phone again. And now we can see that the camera is being brought into the Rodecaster video over the USB port. I did notice that it lost some of the settings when it rebooted. So let's go back into the image settings here. And I think it was just the color temperature that got reset. So I'll change that back to 4800, which was looking pretty good. And now we've got the camera 5 in the Rodecaster video set to the USB output from the camera. One other thing I noticed is that the colors from the USB look slightly different than they do from the HDMI port. So I'm actually going to tweak the picture a little bit more in here now that we're looking at the USB output. I'm actually going to change that chroma back to 7. I think that was making it too pink in this view. And then let's go back here and let's up the contrast a little bit here and maybe drop the brightness again. Just a subtle tweak, but I think this looks a little better now over USB. So remember how I mentioned the wired Ethernet connection before? This camera also supports NDI and SRT outputs, which actually opens up a lot more possibilities for using this with different gear and even more portable setups. So first, let's take a look at NDI. Back in the iPhone app, I'm actually going to go out of the image settings and I'm going to go to the NDI settings in the app. Here you can choose the resolution of the NDI output that you want the camera to support. I'll set it to 1080p, and then I'm going to turn on the NDI feature. You can see it's actually showing me the IP address of the camera here, and I recognize that this is actually not the IP address of the wired network connection, which makes sense because I just unplugged the wired network connection. So I'm going to go switch this back around and plug in the PoE adapter so that we get the NDI video feed coming over the network. Again, a wired network is always going to give you better performance, so we're going to do that first. Okay, I'm going to go back to the USB output settings and set it to PoE adapter, and that's going to do a quick reset. And then I'm going to go back and reconnect it, and we'll be able to actually see the wired IP address. Okay, we're back in the app. I'll go ahead and go to setup, and here we can confirm on the NDI settings that now we have the IP address of the wired connection. So first what we're going to do is bring in the NDI feed to the Magewell Pro Convert. This is a little box that sits on your network and has a HDMI or SDI port output, and you can pull in video feeds from all sorts of different things over the network using this box. I use this for lots of different testing things and just to send video around between upstairs and downstairs, and it's a great little utility to have. So I've got the web interface loaded up here, and you can see that it's already actually found the camera on the network. One thing I did notice is that it's showing me the Wi-Fi IP address here, but it's showing me the name as the wired IP address. So I'm not actually sure if this is going to go over Wi-Fi. I think it will. And this is kind of one of my problems with NDI is that it's kind of hard to control. It's all very automatic. So I'll go ahead and actually just select that. And the box down here is actually the Magewell Pro Convert output brought into the recording. So this is the actual feed that you're seeing from the NDI, and you can see that it's not quite as smooth a frame rate as the live camera, and that's probably because it is coming in over Wi-Fi instead of the wired connection that I gave it. But NDI is not the only option. We also have an SRT option in the camera. So if I go back to the app here, I can click on SRT settings, and you can see here, we again have the resolution option. We can choose the port number that it listens on, and we can choose the SRT delay and check the little enable SRT box. This will then show you down below the SRT address, which is showing me the wired IP address, which I can confirm here, and the port number. So now let's take a look at the SRT. And to do this, I'm going to show you the Magewell Director Mini. Here I can go click on the plus. I can click on SRT caller, so it will call the camera. And now I'm going to type in the AVKANS Go. Here, I'm going to give it the IP address of the wired connection from the camera. So I'll go back into the SRT settings just so I can get the IP address here and copy this over. It's 10.11.202.37. Here it's asking for the port number next, which is 1026. And I'll go ahead and click create. And that pulls up the SRT feed into the Director Mini, which I can then use as a camera angle. So here, the AVKANS Go feed is being brought over SRT into the Magewell Director Mini. And I can use this just alongside any other camera that I have, wired or other network cameras, and create scenes and mix the show. This is using the wired connection since I confirmed I entered the wired connection's IP address. This also happens to look a lot smoother than the NDI version of the feed, which is very nice. So that's already pretty cool, but I should also mention a few wishlist items I have after having played around with this for a little bit. They have already done a firmware update for the camera and an app update since they launched it, so I'm sure they'll be pushing out more changes. So here's a few things I would like to see. Number one, number indicators in the app. You can see these sliders are just a little bit hard to use with your large finger on the tiny slider. I also wish I could expose the picture a little bit darker because this looks a little bit brighter than what I want it to look like. This is the camera's HDMI feed, which again, the colors from the HDMI look a little bit different than the colors from the NDI feed. This is the camera feed coming over NDI. And you can see it looks quite different than the same camera over HDMI. So coming over HDMI, I would like to see the ability to have this look more consistent, or at least be able to drop the exposure a little bit more to make it closer. I would also like to see manual shutter speed controls so I can lock the shutter at 1/60th of a second to get a nice motion blur. It looks like it maybe did that already, but I don't have any control over the shutter speed here, so I would like to see that. So to wrap this up, let's talk about the price. This camera is $350, including with the NDI license. Now, if you want the PoE adapter, that's going to be around $30 to $40, so you can expect around $400 total for this kit. The GoPro you can find around $330, $350, but you will also need the $80 media mod. The media mod is what gives you the HDMI out on the back. So that is now already over $400. And remember, the GoPro has no optical zoom, no NDI, no SRT, and less control over the picture quality. The size of these, this is only slightly larger than the GoPro once you add the media mod. So you can still stick this in places where larger cameras won't fit. I'm just really excited that I now have a good option I can recommend to people who are thinking about using a GoPro for live streams. You will be fighting with a GoPro if you're trying to use it as a wired camera for your live streams. This one seems to be made for exactly that. So thanks again to AVKANS for sending this over for me to test out. And of course, join one of my weekly live streams if you have any questions, or leave a comment down below. And of course, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.